Welcome to Evidence Based, a new Harbinger psychology podcast. I'm your host, Cassie Stossel. On today's episode, we're talking about the neuroscience of why women are so hard on themselves and how to quiet the inner critic for good with Dr. Betsy Holmberg, author of Unkind Mind. Betsy is a psychologist and author specializing in overthinking and negative self-talk. She writes for Psychology Today and has been featured in radio, television, and podcasts. Before that, she ran the mental health service line at McKinsey Company and received her PhD from Duke University. Hi, Betsy. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, Cassie. It's so good to be here.
I'm really excited to talk about this topic. I think it's really relatable, especially to a lot of women. So I think this is just such an important topic. And I love that you start your book off with a personal story of how you came to study neuroscience and the inner critic. Can you talk more about that and what you discovered?
Yeah. So I kind of came from a bad place. So my husband left me after 2 years of marriage, and my son was only 15 months old. So, it's that time with a baby and it's hormones and it's so all encompassing. And then suddenly the rug got completely pulled out from underneath me. And so I went on antidepressants, had wonderful family help me, and I got through that time. But it was 3 years later, and I was still on my antidepressant. And I was like, life's in a steady state now. And so I feel like I should be able to kind of do this on my own. And so every time I tried to titrate off my medication, my negative self talk and inner critic went raw. I mean, it was everything. And it was, I can't do this. I can't be a single parent. I can't raise this kid the way I wanted this kid to be raised. Everyone's judging me. I'm so different than all the other moms. And it just was endless. And I was just getting so frustrated and felt like I'm broken for life. Like I'm never going to get better. And I can't believe this event has literally shifted who I was. And so I went into the literature because I thought, well, if I'm going to be broken, let me at least figure out how and why. And what I found in there, I was like, this is wild. And I can't believe no one's talking about it. And it's so neuroscience-y and the language is so hard to communicate that I can see where it hasn't gotten out yet, but it was something that shifted me immediately. And I was able to titrate off my medication and like start feeling healed. And so I thought, I got to get this idea out. I want other people to know.
Yeah, I love that. And your book does have a focus on women in particular. Why, in your experience, I mean, I could guess, but I'd love to know why women are so hard on themselves, in particular as compared to men.
I mean, we have impossible standards. Like, it's just impossible. So, between we're supposed to be assertive at work, but you got to be nice, or, you want to like look pretty, but don't do too much. I mean, we're constantly battling this. Like, I grew up in the generation where we read all the magazines, and I look back and think, I can't believe we did that to ourselves. Like, our whole culture was how to be better, how not to be who you are. And like you add that layer then of like we are kind of physically a little more unsafe in our world and like financially more unsafe. We carry so many of the responsibilities of childcare and aging parents and all of this, and that's so hush hush, but women are overwhelmed and it's going to come out in our thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I really related that to that too. Like I also read all those magazines and it's interesting to see how this generation it's shifted into like being that girl, like my 5 to 9 before my 9 to 5, like sort of all that narrative and it's very similar but just presented in a different way in a way that it's like healthy for you to have this sort of overachieving perfectionist culture and I'm an older daughter. I have that type A personality and when I was going through cancer treatment, I really struggled to take a back seat to all that thoughts because I'm used to being the caretaker. I'm used to like worrying about the emotions of my dad and my sister versus having them worry about me. So that really spoke to me and like your own experience too of all those negative thoughts and that endless cycle of self-bashing, really.
Totally. Totally. And we are used to being that role, so then it's so scary to ask someone else to do that role for us because we're like that's our job in the world, and like it's not someone else's job to do it for us. And so it's terrifying.
Yeah, and you were talking about how you went to the literature, and I was finding myself apologizing a lot to my husband during that. Like anytime he had to do something for me, I was like, "I'm sorry." And I was like, "Why am I apologizing for being sick?" essentially. And what I was trying to say was thank you, but like the way I was programmed was I was being a burden. So I started every time I had the feeling to say I'm sorry, I started saying thank you instead, and it really shifted, like the narrative in my brain. So yeah, reading does really help with that.
That is a very cool shift. That was super cool.
Yeah. So getting kind of into the science, you talk about the DMN and the CEN. Could you talk about what those are briefly and how they're different?
Totally. So we feel the experience is we just have this inner monologue of ourselves and that everything is all coming from us. And what the neuroscience shows is that's not the case. We actually have separate thought networks that do separate things. And so the central executive network is our most sophisticated human network. And it is pretty much like at the bottom of it, it's all the thoughts you choose to have. So when you want to think about something, you're using your central executive network. So if you're working on a work presentation, if you're really listening hard to a friend, if you're doing a math problem, all central executive. And then we have a second network, which is more primitive, called the default mode network. And this one runs all the time when you're not using your central executive. So they're either or. You're either in one or you're in the other. And this one started in our hunter gatherer days based on where it is in the brain and how our brain evolved. And it's really all about keeping us in the clan. So it scans everything around us and sees what are the norms, what am I supposed to be doing, what is my role, where am I in the hierarchy. It looks at all of those things, and then it's a voice that then directs back to you to say, well, you're not doing well enough here, and that person's doing so much better at that, and you need to be acting more like that if you want to keep being relevant in our clan. And so it's completely different. So that inner monologue, that voice we listen to all day long, is the default mode network.
I'm very familiar with that friend.
Aren't we all?
So you talk about getting to know, this default mode network, or, we can call it the inner critic. What are some ways that you recommend people sort of get to know and understand that?
So the first thing is to separate from it. And that's the hardest because we felt that it's been us the whole time. And it does this nasty little trick where it's like, I'm sad, I'm worthless, I don't look good enough. It uses the I word so it feels like us. But so the first step is separate from it. So you can do this by naming it. You can have an image of, like, you could be an overeager little second grader that thinks it knows everything and is trying to explain the world to you. The one that really worked for me is the idea of being the CEO of your brain. And you have all of these awesome employees. You have hearing, you have sensing, you have taste, you have all these wonderful things. And then you have this obnoxious employee that sits in your office all day long and it just harps on you about not feeling like they're being valued and this and that, and that it's getting in the way of your life. And so to think of it like an employee that you want to say, go back to your cubicle so you can shut the door and actually do what you want to do. So anything like that you can use to separate it is the first step. And then the second is to listen to it. Like, what does it care about? And everyone is different because everyone grew up with different cultural conditioning and family conditioning. And so we all have a different set of things that our DMN has learned is important. So is it focused on finances? Is it focused on being smart? I know for some families that's hugely important. In other families, it doesn't matter at all. And as you listen to it, you'll start to get kind of the personality of the DMN. And we have exercises in the book that go deeper into this so that you really can start to identify it when it's going on.
Yeah, and you talk about some common themes of people's DMNs. Can you talk about, I think you talk about three in the book.
Oh, yeah. So I tend to group these thoughts. These are the thoughts I consistently kept hearing from people. And the first one, specifically women, I think men have a different collection of these thoughts. But for women, Number one is fitting in. So this is belonging. Like, do I fit in? Do I look all right? Am I acting okay? So as we look at everyone around us, we try to shape shift into belonging essentially. So that's one category of thoughts. The second is failing. And so this is all around safety and security. Like, am I going to be okay? Will I get cancer? Do I have enough money? These extend to our family members. Is my mom going to be okay? Is my kid going to be okay? And thoughts along those lines. The last one is fretting, which is worthiness. Am I good enough? I can't do this. I'll never live up. And so we tend to DMN in those areas.
Yeah, I was just thinking about you were talking about sort of the safety of our family and whatnot. And one thing I noticed, if I've seen my dad or my sister and they're like leaving my house going home, I'll be like super worried about are they okay? How's the drive? But it's funny because in day-to-day life, they're like living their own lives and it's not constantly in that shift of thoughts on a daily basis. It's just like when it's in my, peripheral, I guess. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's worry. Anytime we're worrying either about ourselves or our family members, that's the DMN thinking that it is keeping you safe by managing all of these things, but it's not doing anything. It's not helping anyone. It's just making us feel worse.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we all have our own sort of unhealthy coping strategies for trying to silence this voice. But what are some common unhealthy coping strategies that you see for someone trying to silence this inner critic? And, what are some alternatives to alternately this avoidance that we're doing?
Yeah, this was one of the craziest parts of researching this was to see that like we have been silencing the DMN for a long time. We just didn't know we were doing it. And all the ways we are doing it tend to be the things that we want to do in excess or have addictive properties. So if anything's like that, it probably silences the DMN. So things that come to mind, alcohol use, cigarette use, overeating, binging shows, things like that. And like if we take alcohol for an example, so alcohol decreases the functional connectivity of the DMN. So that is that unbelievably freeing feeling of I suddenly don't care what anyone thinks about me at this party. I suddenly feel like I fit in. I everything seems funnier. Like I'm being less hard on myself. It's great. But the flip side is that the DMN is our behavior police. And so we also may say things that we wouldn't otherwise say, or disclose secrets, or do things that we wouldn't otherwise do. And so then when you wake up the next morning, your DMN comes on in a wave like, what the hell happened last night? And it goes stronger and stronger. And you can think of all of these networks like muscles. So the more you use them, the stronger they get. And so it strengthens the DMN, which then makes you want to drink more to stop it. And this is one of those vicious cycles that leads to addiction. So, when it comes to other strategies for turning it off, one thing I actually like to encourage people to do is to, if you're looking for like an action, is to rethink about your hobbies, like all the stuff you like to do when you were a kid. And we tend to not make time for them because, they're expensive and they take time away from all the other things women are doing in their lives. So, but if it's something that is fun, that takes you out of your mind, if you will, then it is a great replacement for these other types of activities that may have negative consequences.
Yeah, for me, a big one was doom scrolling. I couldn't sort of stop, which obviously, like you said, with the alcohol example, it just exacerbates that thought process. And so, a couple of things that I tried was I started putting more ebooks on my phone. So when I had the urge to just the motion of scrolling, I was reading instead. But I've also tried to get back into, like, some of those hobbies like coloring and, knitting and all that because the scrolling was just out of control for me. Like, that was definitely my coping mechanism.
Oh, totally. My guilty one is I puzzle. I love puzzling. So I love puzzling. So if I'm starting to doom scroll or something and I'm getting into one of those jacks, I'm like, okay, stop this. And so I'll put the puzzle out and I'll listen to music and I'll sing along because I can't be DMNing if I'm singing, lyrics as loud as I possibly can. So, whatever those things are that fill you up that aren't the negative ones are a real help.
Yeah, and I'm super glad that in your book you do talk about meditation, how it not isn't for everybody. I know that's the case for me. But what are some ways that you recommend people can get those benefits of meditation without just sitting and being with those thoughts?
Yeah, this was so important to me because it's so frustrating having all these people constantly tell us to meditate, and then my DMN latches onto that and is like, well, you could be feeling better in 15 minutes a day and you're not doing it. So how lazy are you? And da da da. And it's like, and I don't want to sit. So I broke it down to its base components of like neurologically what is meditating doing in the brain. And anything you do that shuts off your DMN is functionally copying meditation. So this is back to, doing things that you love to do. This could be mindfulness. It's a much more kind of palatable one, which is like really focus on the sky or really focus on what you feel or really focus on eating something. That can help. When it comes to like one thing that I use, which I don't know if it will resonate with other people, but for me, it's the concept of wait, I don't have to think right now. Like there's so many times in our life where we're forced into thinking and it's intense and it's hard, but there's those other times like when you're doing dishes or walking your dog that you don't have to be thinking. And I think we're just so used to automatically doing it that we listen to it and we think we're being productive, but it's not. And so just having that course correction of like, I can just be here without thinking can turn it off pretty easily.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I go back to the sitting with the thoughts. Like a lot of people can't do that. And for me, a lot of mindfulness practices including the breath, which for me is quite triggering because of my previous health issues. So I'm like, oh great, like I'm gonna think about my breathing right now and that's gonna cause me to spiral. So like you said, just finding anything that isn't activating that voice can be sort of that meditative practice. So I really appreciate that. I've been asking a lot of experts on the podcast this season about that because breath work is like at the core of every self-help book. And I'm like, but what if that's the problem for you, you know?
Yeah. What if you would actually feel better just singing songs at the top of your lungs? It does the same thing, you know? And I love that you said that because that is such a cultural part is sitting with your thoughts. And and part of what this research shows is that these thoughts are really stupid. Like these are coming from a very primitive survival network. And the other thing is these thoughts are automatic. So we've kind of honored them and put them on a pedestal because we think they're somehow associated with us. But when you see them, like when you like put them essentially in a figurative loincloth and get that they're just trying to get you to not be kicked out of a cave, it's easier to like really let them go and not feel that they're going to overwhelm you.
Yeah, and just sort of deflate the power out of them. And I love your singing example because that reminds me, like, as a teen, my favorite thing in the world was screaming like my favorite songs in the car. And like, you truly felt that like bliss. So I love that. I need to start doing that again.
That and dancing. I mean, why are we not all dancing in our kitchens all the time too?
Okay, so I want to talk about stress. So, what is actually happening with our DMN when we're under stress? And you talk about a DMN driven stress response. What does that look like?
Sure. So, okay, we'll paint the stress picture. And this is a helpful model for pretty much any time the body is in any sort of stress. So, this is true for our emotions. This is true for sleep, which we'll also talk about. But essentially, we have an amygdala, and the amygdala is like this little threat monitor, and it's constantly looking and evaluating and seeing is there something I need to be scared about. And if there's something kind of low level, it kicks a message to the CEN and says, hey, are we good? And typically the CEN will look at whatever it is and be like, oh, it's just a fire truck on the street. It's not coming here. We're fine. And the amygdala's like, cool, got it. And then everything stays status quo. But if the amygdala experiences a big threat, it's like, okay, my turn. And it shuts down the CEN and it shuts down other kind of non-essential parts of the body, like it shuts down digestion, shuts down reproduction, and it goes into survival mode. And the unfortunate part for us is the DMN is considered a survival system. It was founded as that, it was created as that, as part of our more ancient brain. And so we get to listen to DMN thoughts when we're stressed, and we don't have the ability to turn them off because our CEN is offline. And I mean, this has happened to me so many times where if you're in a DMN cycle, so DMNs, it cycles, and it often cycles negatively. We have a very negative bias to it. And if you get deeper and deeper into it, the DMN has a lot of links to the amygdala, will say, hey, we're in a threat situation, even if it's not in the world. But you know how when you're in your thoughts and you can sometimes not even know where you are? I mean, your brain is really powerful that way. And so it can create an entire stress response just from whatever the DMN is scared of. And so that's where it can put us in a stress response, put us in a stress response. And chronic stress has that same situation where it will ultimately weaken the CEN and strengthen the DMN. So it can make everything harder and harder.
Yeah, oh my gosh, this is just a perfect example of what I was telling you before we started recording. Like, I pulled a muscle and my brain could not stop saying it was like a heart attack for days. I'm like, it's this, and it's just a pulled muscle. Like that happens and you have to like rest, but I was stressing myself out so bad that it was just getting worse.
Oh yeah, and it's automatic, So these thoughts are you cannot help these thoughts coming up, and that's what shifted everything for me because it was like, wait, I'm not the one worried about this. It's this thought network doing it, and so it was such a helpful shift.
Yeah. So when we're in that, how can we stop ourselves or how can we stop the DMN from making it worse when we're in sort of that stressful situation and then it's automatically going?
Yeah, so you're going to hear it. It's going to keep going. I did I felt when I was writing the book and I got to this point where I was like, I'm going to be like a monk. I'm going to be walking around in bliss. Nothing's going to affect me. And I had one stressful thing happen and my DMN flared and I was like, what? This thing won't shut up. And so when stress happens, knowing about these networks, it's hearing the thoughts, but not giving them any validity, not believing them. You're like, okay, I'm in a DMN mode. It's being so gentle with yourself to be like, I'm hearing them all. They're there. And you're trying to distract yourself as many ways you can, reading, whatever it is, talking with a friend. That can really help. And what I've noticed is that when people know about the DMN, yes, sure, they get into their stress response, but they recover quicker because they're not making meaning of what the DMN was saying. They just are like, oh, I got the good night's sleep. I got over the sickness and I'm feeling better. And they can actually truly let that experience go and not hold on to it. And that's huge.
We'll be right back after this short break.
Hello, I'm Dr. Matthew McKay, creator of Therapy Assist. We've designed Therapy Assist to be an accessible and efficient platform. By providing a library of thousands of resources and the ability to customize workbooks, we're putting evidence-based tools in your hand, helping to improve client outcomes. Research consistently shows that between-session homework can significantly improve client outcomes and reduce dropout. But finding the right tools to assign can be time-consuming. Therapy Assist makes this process faster and easier. You can search through a library of curated resources, including psychoeducation, worksheets, exercises, meditations, and much more. You can use these resources both during your sessions and as homework assignments for clients, all with the confidence that they are rooted in evidence-based therapies. Therapy Assist's resource library is built on the firm foundation of New Harbinger Publications' 50-plus years of pioneering work in self-help and psychology. So you'll have resources created by world-renowned psychologists and researchers right at your fingertips. Our platform makes it easy for you to find exactly what you need with search filters and curated protocols. These comprehensive tools provide you with the ability to search for a resource by any combination of therapy type, presenting problem, transdiagnostic mechanism, intervention, or resource type. Therapy Assist helps you support more clients between sessions in less time. I know therapists often spend hours searching through files, books, or online to find the resources they need. Therapy Assist takes care of this for you, saving you valuable time you can use to focus on what matters most, helping your clients heal and thrive. With Therapy Assist, you can also review completed resources ahead of time, which means you'll be fully prepared for each session, ready to make the most of your time with your client. We understand the importance of having access to the most effective client resources in your work, and we're committed to continuously updating our library to keep pace with the latest research and cutting-edge tools in the field. Your client's privacy and security are top priorities for us. Therapy Assist is fully HIPAA compliant, so you can trust that the data entered is kept safe and confidential. To start your free trial and find out how Therapy Assist can transform your practice, go to therapyassist.com. We're here to support you every step of the way.
Throughout this conversation, we've sort of mentioned how men and women have different stressors, but how exactly do men and women process stress differently?
So, as far as we've gotten in the literature is in rat studies, but they're pretty interesting and kind of telling. So, here's what science is saying at this point is that the neurons in the stress center of the brain fire faster in females than males. And female rats have more receptors for stress related neurotransmitters than male rats, which means women are potentially quicker to a stress response and our stress responses last longer. And then you couple this with there are hormone implications as well. So testosterone inhibits stress responses and estrogen sensitizes the system. So there are times if we have high estrogen levels that we will be very close to stress responses. And then there'll be other times when we're a little more protected. So we have more variability, which is yet another reason why I feel like women are so hard on themselves, because when we have variability, we then get upset when we're in one of our low moments and we get stressed really easily. And then we're like, well, what's wrong with me? And it's just a lot for us to manage the variability that our bodies include, bring along with the world. So
Yeah. And when we're in that stress response, like, we've talked about sort of those activities that are better coping strategies, but do you have some common strategies for like when you're in the stress response and how to sort of regulate your body out of that?
totally. So my favorite is binaural beats. I know they got a lot of coverage, but they are super cool. So it's music that sends different frequencies to each ear. And then the brain has to synchronize its brain waves in order to process it. And that process of synchronizing brain waves actually calms the brain. And what I love about it is I can do it while I'm doing something else. So if I'm stressed about working and I'm working, if I put them on, I can feel everything calm down, and that's helpful. I like guided meditations too. When people are really stressed, I feel like you get like 5% of the benefit of the guided meditation. When you do that and you like are like, okay, I'm gonna feel better, and you do it, and you're like, that was why did I even try to do that? I barely did anything. But probably taking those few breaths and closing your eyes brought your stress system down just a little bit, and it got you in the right direction. So even if it feels like a total failure, your DMN's the one telling you it's a failure, by the way. It's not. And the last one, which is an interesting one I haven't used very much, but it's gotten a lot of literature, is shaking. So you'll see it after something scary has happened. People are often shaking, and it's how the body eliminates a stress response, and it's how it completes a stress response. And so if just try shaking, and it will quicken the stress response from getting out of your system.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I read your book, and then I'm doing an interview on polyvagal theory. And there's so much connection here with those activities you're talking about because it's the stimulating both sides because like you're mentioning those two networks can't be on at the same time. And so there's so much crossover there. Like it's really interesting.
Yeah, I love polyvagal theory.
Yeah. And then we did briefly mention that we were going to talk about sleep. So I want to go a little bit more into that and how sleep affects our DMN.
Of course, because the 2 a.m. DMN session has to be one of the like more awful experiences of the human. The DMN decouples during this going to sleep process. So it's like literally one of the critical stages to you falling asleep is having the brain areas associated with the DMN stop talking to each other. And if the DMN is rolling and it's having a field day, it stops that from happening and it makes it impossible for us to fall asleep. So that's why our racing thoughts just absolutely drive us nuts. And the kicker is we need sleep in order to make it more healthy. So there's a fluid in the brain that kind of keeps everything rolling. And that fluid increases by 60% during nighttime and during sleep time. And it's getting rid of all of the neurotoxins. It gets rid of all of the byproducts of the day. It just like cleans everything up. So if you've ever like gone to bed really upset about something and then you wake up the next day, you're like, oh, I think I can do this. It's that cleaning process that sleep does. And so if our DMNs are running all the time and we're not getting to sleep, we essentially have a dirty brain. And dirty brains function, it's the same thing as stress. So the CEN gets impaired quicker than anything else. And so it's going to be harder to focus. And it's going to feel even harder to turn the DMN off. And what I've seen in my work is that the DMN gets nastier. Like it's not just saying normal DMN thoughts, it gets even uglier, it gets more catastrophic. And so it's something to know in why sleep is so important and why sometimes we have a hard time getting it.
Yeah, and also like you said, the 2 a.m. wake up, like I've read that that has to do with like our cortisol levels being too high, and that's sort of the stress hormone. So that really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and when you think of like cortisol, like the amygdala and the DMN being like cousins or, brothers in our brain, it also makes sense that then the DMN goes so crazy too.
Yeah, exactly. And you briefly mentioned it when we were just talking about sort of that meditation taking you down a notch. I think what you're referring to is what you call the zones of regulation. Can you talk more about what that is and how that can be helpful to understand?
Yeah, this is a model we use, my son and I use, and it has been so helpful. And so I've introduced it to as many people as I can. So imagine your emotions like a thermometer. And at the blue part, so at the very bottom, is when you're feeling sad, low, weary, etc. In the green zone is when you're calm, energized, happy, engaged. Orange zone is when you're starting to kind of things are getting on your nerves, you're starting to feel like, oh, I'm not handling this so well. And then red zone is when you've lost it, you're angry, you're upset, etc. And having a quick hand way to talk about our emotions is so helpful because like if you're going into the red zone, when you're in the red zone, the amygdala has shut down the CEN and you don't have access to be able to think well. And so we need shorthands in those moments. And so when you can say to someone, I'm going in the red zone, then they have that sense of, oh, okay, so this person is really struggling. And it gives a guidebook for everyone around them to say, this is not the time to problem solve. The person's CEN isn't online. They can't talk through anything like that. This is the time to be there with them. It's the time to be calm so that they can hopefully co regulate out of the red zone and then back into the orange and then green zone. And it it helps us have a way to kind of a shorthand for how to handle each other's emotions and be there for each other. And the other thing I like is it also normalizes emotional reactions, especially with kids, because kids lose it all the time. And so when we say you're in the red zone, you're in the red zone, they start to identify that. And then when mommy goes in the red zone, it's not as surprising. It's not as shocking. It's like, and it starts to build their empathy skills to say, oh, so what happens to me can happen to you. And so I think it's a wonderful way for groups to tool for groups to have to manage emotions together.
Yeah, and this is reminding me of Inside Out too, because anger is red and anxiety is orange, and then joy is blue, and I'm just thinking like that that really tracks with this, and that was like the visual in my mind when you were talking about this.
I had never put that together. That's so true.
So now we've sort of talked about all the negatives about the DMN and letting it run our lives, but what happens for us when we stop letting that DMN drive and instead we're sort of connecting with our heart? What does it look like in practice?
Yeah. So first, I have to give a plug for the science. The science is super cool, which is that the heart has its own neural structure. So it has its own brain and it has neurons and it's communicating all the time. And where it goes into the brain is to the CEN. And originally you're like, wait, how is that? Like, why would that even make sense that the most sophisticated, the part of the brain that came up with quantum mechanics is connected to something that pumps blood? Like, it just doesn't really make sense. But when you think about how easy it is to focus on things we love, it suddenly is like, yes, like that does, like, we will do anything for things we love. We will go to unbelievable bounds. And it's because of that connection between these two areas. So when we connect into our hearts, we are also able to focus better. And so what it looks like in practice is, first of all, like getting to understand those stories and those scripts we've been telling ourselves forever, on how we should be and how we need to be in the world. So I think of a wonderful person who, we use different names in the book and it's all composites, but call her Cynthia. And she hated going out. She was single. She was alone, and she loved animals so much. She loved dogs so much. And she's like, but I can't have a dog. I have to go out. I have to meet someone. I have to be available to be flexible for their schedule. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So in her mind, she's like, I'll get a dog when I'm finally settled down. And it was like, no, like that's wrong. That's your DMN saying that you need to be this specific kind of girl in order to meet someone. And that is patently false. Like, put it back in its loincloth. And so she got her dog and she has felt so much better. She's like, I'm grounded. I feel more like myself. I have this love in my life. So she's more connected to her heart and her CEN. And she said, and the craziest thing is I'm meeting better guys because I'm not going to the bars. I'm meeting people that I connect with way more. And so when we can stop living by the shoulds and start living to what really resonates with us, it can open up whole new worlds.
What's amazing is that, the common statement, like, listen to your head and not your heart, it sounds like it should be the absolute opposite based on the science, which is so interesting.
The one that kills me is the listen to your gut. Listen to your gut.
My gut knows nothing.
Yeah, my gut, the gut, it directly links to the DMN. So it's like, oh, let's listen to one stress system tell another stress system on all the ways that, everything is going to go wrong. And so, yeah, we need to stop listening to our gut and we need to stop listening to our head and get into our hearts instead. Yeah.
Yeah, the minute I learned about the gut brain connection, I was like, no wonder I always have a stomach ache, like I'm always anxious.
It makes so much sense now.
And as we're, leaning into that heart, like a big piece is self-love, which is so hard. Why do you think practicing self-love is so hard?
I mean, I think it starts with our cultural conditioning. So we are so meant to be projecting love out into the world. As women, I feel like that's generally the role, is we're supposed to take care of everyone, give them love. And we're doing it listening to this thought network that we thought was ourselves, telling us that we were bad all the time. And so it's really hard to love yourself if you think you're also telling yourself you're worthless. So that's one piece. And I think the other piece is like, it's just, okay, it reminds me of my dog. Is my dog, he's adorable and he's a little Shih Tzu and love him to death. But he's also pissed on every piece of living room furniture I have. Like, he pukes everywhere. I mean, he talks to
Yeah.
me all the time. I can't believe he's not in the middle of this conversation. And so, it's frustrating. And yet I love him in all of his doggy glory, and I can see his doggy glory objectively. And
Yeah.
I think what we as women can't do is we can't see our humanness objectively. We have a hard time connecting with, like, yeah, I make mistakes all the time, but I care a lot and I love a lot. And I have, provided a lot of care to the world, and to love ourselves in all of our human glory, because it's a messy package, but so's every other package on the planet. We're not alone. And so if we can turn that onto ourselves, it can be a real help.
Betsy, I think that's such a strong place for us to wrap up with self love. Do you have any final thoughts for the listeners?
Yeah, so I think my one big thought to share with the listeners is to remember that these thoughts are automatic. So anytime you get one of these thoughts, it's not you saying it. That's not really how you feel. You don't feel that everyone's cooler than you. You don't feel that you're weird. It's this thing trying to protect you. And so the more you can separate from it and recognize it as separate and kind of in its own way stupid, the healthier and more connected to your true self you'll be.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your work in this and really breaking down such a big concept of neuroscience and making us understand and sort of gives ourselves a break from those thoughts. So I really appreciate your time today and for your book. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This was blessed.
A cutting edge neuroscientific approach to quiet your unkind mind and cultivate the self compassion, confidence, and courage you need to thrive. Does it ever feel like there's a hypercritical, negative voice inside your head telling you that you aren't good enough, pretty enough, smart enough, or worthy of success or love? Negative self talk is all too common, especially for women. This inner critic originally served an important evolutionary purpose to ensure survival. The problem is, this voice can be difficult to switch off, leading to anxiety, depression, and low self esteem. So, how can you move past negative self talk and start living with confidence? Written by a psychologist and expert in negative thinking, this book shines a light on where your hypercritical inner voice comes from, a deeply rooted survival mechanism in the brain called the default mode network, DMN. Using powerful skills drawn from neuroscience, you'll learn how to flip the switch on your unkind mind so you can move past self critical thoughts, increase self compassion, and decrease feelings of shame, guilt, regret, and inadequacy. You'll also discover how to stay calm and present in social settings, stop comparing yourself to others, reconnect with your true inner voice, your kind mind, live with courage and authenticity. Once you understand where your inner critic comes from, you'll feel more empowered to tune it out, focus on your true inner voice instead, and get back to living your life with all the courage and confidence needed to thrive. This book will help guide you step by step. Visit our website at www.newharbinger.com and use coupon code podcast25 to receive 25% off your entire order. New Harbinger Publications is an independent, employee-owned publisher of books on psychology, health, spirituality, and personal growth. For over 50 years, our evidence-based self-help books and pioneering workbooks have helped readers make positive changes to improve mental health and well-being. Founded by psychologists Matthew McKay and Patrick Fanning, New Harbinger is proud to be an employee-owned company. Our books reflect our core values of integrity, sustainability, compassion, and trust. Written by leaders in the field and recommended by therapists worldwide, New Harbinger books are practical, accessible, and provide real tools for real change. The best continuing education training does more than just fulfill requirements. It opens your mind to new possibilities, increases your confidence, and gives you powerful tools to transform your clients' lives. Praxis Continuing Education and Training partners with world-class experts to create cutting-edge, evidence-based courses for mental and behavioral health professionals. Learn how to heal trauma with Robin Walzer, explore values with Kelly Wilson, and master the basics of acceptance and commitment therapy with Matt Boone through an on-demand course. Or join experts and like-minded professionals live to take your practice to a new level. Find your next training opportunity at praxiscet.com. That's praxiscet.com. Do you have an idea for another episode? Do you want to send us a message? Our email address is podcast@newharbinger.com. We'd love to hear from you. This podcast was edited by Jesse Fancushion. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love if you rated, reviewed, and subscribed to the show, and we hope that you might share it with anyone who could benefit from the content. This podcast is not a substitute for counseling with a licensed provider.